Hello, welcome to part 2 of our ongoing series on pranayama. Part 1, we address the importance and the practice of diaphragmatic breathing. Diaphragmatic breath is where the diaphragm is used in the breathing practice. The diaphragm pushes down, pushing the stomach, the intestines, the kidneys, the pancreas out of the way to create space for the lungs to inflate. In diaphragmatic breathing, the chest is maintained still and all the action is in the belly like this. Breathing in, breathing out. Good. Of all the patterns, that is by far the most important pattern. So if you are not yet familiar with diaphragmatic breathing, please take a moment to go back and watch part 1 and then practice that until you can breathe comfortably diaphragmatically. Then you're ready to take the next step. So diaphragmatic breathing alone is not sufficient to maintain health. We need 2 different patterns, diaphragmatic breathing and a complete breath. Between those two, we have the ability to maintain homeostasis, to maintain our health. And so these are kind of the foundations. In yoga, sometimes we'll call it a yogic breath or complete breath. Now, there are many different variations of the complete breath, but if you think about just the word complete, you're trying to utilize your entire lung capacity rather than just your chest or just your abdomen or just the upper lobes under the collarbones, trying to increase the usage. So, let's take a look at the 2 basic types of a complete breath. And they both start off the same. In both schools, the inhale is the same, but some traditions reverse the exhale. So let me demonstrate. I start the inhale in the belly, then ribs, chest, collarbones, and then the exhale. Now both schools agree on that part, breathing in. But some traditions then say, begin to release the shoulders, the chest, ribs, and then finish breathing out from the belly. So one more time, breathe into the belly, ribs, chest, collarbones, and then release the shoulders, release the chest, release the ribs, and then exhale, finishing from the abdomen. Okay. There's a smaller school of yoga who use a complete breath in a slightly different way. They start off the same, breathing into the belly, ribs, chest, shoulders, collarbones, but then they go back to the belly to start the exhale, breathing out from the stomach, the ribs, the chest, and then the shoulders. So they reverse the exhale. There is worth in both traditions. There are advantages to both traditions, but if you're new to breathing, I would start with the first one. It is easier to learn and it's more natural. Okay? So we're going to focus on that today. Breathing in to the abdomen, the ribs, the chest, the back, the collarbones, and then exhaling from the shoulders, the chest, the ribs, and then from the belly. And then we'll take a look at a complete back breath, which is my favorite variation on complete breathing. Now, it's interesting that all traditions agree on the inhale. It's only the exhale where there's some differences, but the inhale, everyone agrees you start at the bottom and you save the chest to the very last. I'm a big advocate for when you can do so safely, do something wrong at least once, if you can do so without hurting yourself, just in order to really understand why it's wrong. Okay. So let's try that. I want you to first breathe into your chest, and then when you fill the chest completely, then I want you to continue breathing into the belly. So when you're ready, lift and expand your chest. Hold. Now add air to the belly, and pretty soon you'll realize that you can't. Okay? So that's why the complete breath never starts in the chest. As soon as we breathe into this area here, we lose access to all the other areas of the lungs. So we want to hold the chest in reserve. Now, what's the tendency if you have a fight-flight reaction. Okay? When you're startled, when you're anxious, our instinct is to snatch the breath up into our chest, and when we do that, we lose access to everything else. So we want to retrain our basic habit, our pattern, our reaction, so that we react not with the chest, but with a complete breath, breathing from the bottom all the way up. So let's try it the right way now. Breathe in normally, breathe out normally. Then from the abdomen, breathe out just a little bit more air. This serves a couple purposes. One is it helps you to connect your mind, to focus on this area of your body as you start the inhale. First, relax that contraction and then expand the belly. Then begin to breathe up into the ribs, into the chest, into the shoulders and the collarbones. And then breathe out. Try that again. Breathe in normally, breathe out. Finish exhaling from the abdomen, and then when you're ready to start the inhale, expand the belly, the ribs, the chest, and float the collarbones, and then release the shoulders, the chest, the ribs, and then finish breathing out from the stomach. One more time on your own. A lot of times students get very serious, start frowning and thinking and really working hard on trying to get this right. So I want you to remember the last time you yawned, and a yawn is a perfect, complete breath. And if you think about the yawn, it starts down here, comes up here, and then as you finish, the first thing that happens, the shoulders, and then the chest, and then the abdomen. So a complete breath is as natural as a yawn, and so you don't have to really work and think and try real hard and become rigid. You want it to be as fluid, as smooth, as natural as a yawn, as opposed to really shifting and jerking from one area of the lungs to the other. Just let the breath flow all the way up, flow all the way back. So let's try that 2 or 3 more times and focus on doing it in a relaxed, calm way. Breathe in normally, exhale, just breathe out a little extra air from the abdomen, and then you're ready to begin. Breathe into the belly, the ribs, the chest, the shoulders, the collarbones, float, and then exhale. 2 more times. Start the breath in the belly. Breathe all the way up to the chest, shoulders, collarbones. Let the collarbones float up as you finish the inhale, and then let the shoulders sink as you start exhaling. 1 more time. Okay, good. So that is the basic yogic breath or complete breath. Now you have 2 different patterns, diaphragmatic and complete. And the beauty of having 2 patterns is now by combining them, you can get almost any ratio of oxygen to carbon dioxide. So I breathe in diaphragmatically, in and out, and so often, anytime I feel the urge or I feel the need, I take a complete breath, sometimes 2 or 3, then I go back to diaphragmatic breathing. So I breathe diaphragmatically, and then anytime the carbon dioxide oxygen levels get out of balance slightly, or there's a variety of other reasons that we might want to do a complete breath that have to do with the nervous system and with the health of the lung tissue and the fascia, so there are other reasons too. But just from a simplistic point of view, every time oxygen carbon dioxide levels get out of balance a little bit, you can take a complete breath and then go back to the diaphragmatic breathing. So with just 2 patterns now, I can control the oxygen carbon dioxide levels fairly effectively. Okay. So those of you that want to try a more difficult complete breath, inhale's the same, but when you finish breathing in and you float the collarbones, finish your inhale, then you go back, holding your breath, you back to the belly, and you begin to draw the navel in as you exhale, then the ribs, then the chest, then the collarbones. Okay? Give that a try, and just notice that for most of you it's going to be more difficult. Breathe into the belly, the ribs, the chest, the shoulders, the collarbones. Hold your breath and then start exhaling from the navel, which you'll have to really focus on doing. Draw the abdomen in, then the ribs, then sink the chest, then sink the shoulders as you finish breathing out. So there are a couple reasons why this is a good technique. One is that it is harder. Because it's harder, it is more challenging. So for someone who does a lot of pranayama and gets a little bored, and pranayama is too easy, complete breath is too easy, this adds just a little layer of challenge that can help to keep you interested, keep you focused, keep you engaged. The other reason that this is a nice pattern is that it distributes the oxygen through the lungs more fairly. In a complete breath, in the regular complete breath, the belly fills with air, and then all the air is in the lowest lobes. Okay? Then, as you breathe into the ribs, chest, and shoulders and collarbones, and then almost immediately the collarbones start sinking, which means that the air was only in the upper lobes for a very short period of time, and it was in the lower areas for a very long period of time. Okay? With the second complete breath, breathe into the belly, ribs, chest, shoulders, collarbones, and then exhale from the belly, from the ribs, from the chest, from the shoulders. The amount of time that the air is in the upper areas of the lungs is closer or more equivalent to the amount of time that the lower areas had oxygen. Okay? As a general rule though, it's not a natural way of breathing, and if I'm not sure, I usually go with what is natural, what animals do, what humans do when they aren't interfering with their breathing. So if you aren't sure, the first introduction of complete breathing that I shared with you should be your default. Okay? And then you want it to be as natural as a yawn, breathing all the way up and all the way back down again. However, we're missing, even with what is typically called a complete breath, we're missing one of the largest areas of the lungs, and that is the back of the lungs. Okay? So, how do we access the back of the lungs? Some people have been doing it their whole life, and so for you, it's just a matter of thinking about it and doing it. For most people, though, there's very little consciousness, very little awareness of the back of the lungs and the back in general, and very little control. So this can be a little frustrating, but give it a try, see how it feels, and then I'll share some ideas for how you can improve on this. So the complete back breath, you can either start at the bottom of the back and come up, or you can start at the upper back and go down. If you're new to this, I would focus on starting in the upper back, going down, and then into the belly, up into the ribs, chest, shoulders. So it's a circle. I start inhaling into the upper back, mid back, low back, and then pelvic floor, then into the belly, into the ribs, into the chest, into the shoulders, into the collarbones, and I find that I get about a 15 to 20% greater increase in my volume than I do with the traditional so-called complete breath. Okay? So let's give it a try. As you start your inhale, put your mind in the upper back and think about expanding through the upper back as you start breathing in, and then the mid back expanding, the low back expanding, and then, if you know how, into the pelvic floor. Then continue to breathe into the belly, letting the belly expand, and then lifting the chest, and then floating the collarbones. All on one inhale, and then on the exhale, sink the shoulders, the chest, the ribs, and then finish by exhaling from the abdomen just slightly. Just a little firming here. Try that again. Breathe into the upper back, mid back, low back, and then into the belly, up into the ribs, the chest, the shoulders, the collarbones, and then exhale. To some degree, the exhale will take care of itself. Now, I like to think about the back part of this as getting a running start. The same way someone that has to jump a high bar, an athlete, if they're standing right by the high bar, looking up at it, touching it, and they say, okay, I've got to jump over this, what do? They step back about 15 or 20 feet to get a running start. And they use the running start to build momentum to go up and over the bar. So that's how I think about the back part of this breath. It's like getting a running start before you hit the belly. So I breathe down the back, getting a little momentum, and I find that that allows me to more fully breathe into the belly, get a much stronger action in the abdomen, and then I continue up the front. Okay. Give that a couple more tries, and think about now smoothing it out. Breathe into the upper back, mid back, low back, as if you were running, getting a running start at the belly, and then go right into the belly, and then continue up the ribs, chest, shoulders, collarbones. Now, I also use the back as part of my diaphragmatic breathing now. So this is a little more advanced than the diaphragmatic breath we worked with in part 1, but I still go back to this area here, and I breathe into the upper back, mid back, low back, and then into the belly. And then I breathe out. Now the nice thing about this is I get a much greater volume of air because I'm breathing into one of the larger areas of the lungs, which is the back area, and I get a running start into the abdomen, so I get a much fuller abdominal breath, but my chest is absolutely still. And this means that I'm not initiating a fight-flight response. I'm not getting agitated. It's not stirring up my mind and my brain waves and my nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. I'm able to stay very calm, very relaxed, even though I'm increasing my oxygenation. So it's a very good technique to practice. Here's the problem though. Most people will have trouble. They aren't sure if they're doing it or not. They can't feel anything. They get to thinking about it, and quite often they get a little frustrated and they quit. So, a couple little tricks. One, when you are in anything you're doing, when you're in that twilight zone where you're trying something but you aren't sure if it's working or not, little trick, pretend it is. Imagine it is. Pretend that you can feel the breath in your upper back. Try to feel it, and whether you can feel it or not, pretend that you are. And then mid back, then low back, and then into the belly. And then decide if you're doing just the complete abdominal breath into the back, into the abdomen, or a complete back breath all the way up to the collarbones. Either way, go back to the upper back, mid back, low back, and keep pretending. Now this serves several purposes. One is, over time your brain will decide that this area of your body, the back, must be important because you keep trying to do it, you keep trying to feel it, you keep paying attention to it, and your brain will start to rewire itself to make that easier for you. You'll become more conscious of this over time. And as you become more conscious, you'll begin to notice on those occasions where you actually do breathe into the back a little bit, you'll notice it, and once you notice it, then you can take direct control over it. Okay? So I guess fake it till you make it. Pretend that you're doing it and keep trying, keep thinking about it, keep trying to feel it, keep pretending you're feeling it until you really are feeling it. Okay? Now what about position? A nurse that works in ICU, in the pulmonary wards out of London, was talking about the current pandemic and the problem they were having with people with pneumonia. And she said with pneumonia, the back of the lungs can be very problematic, and so she's been teaching the patients to lay over a pillow on their stomach, draped over a pillow, and teach them how to breathe into their back, and that's very good for them. And it struck me that this is exactly how we often teach people how to practice a complete back breath, child's pose. Okay. Now, if you want to put a bolster and drape over the bolster, that's fine. If you're comfortable in child's pose though, you can take the knees wide, sink the hips back, walk the hands forward, and then just allowing the back to be slightly rounded. And in that position, you can practice breathing into the back and into the abdomen. With practice, this becomes second nature, and the interesting thing is that over time, as you become more conscious of this area here, we can begin to use it to reduce our reactivity, our fight-flight, our tendency to jerk and react. Okay? If I'm startled, if someone snuck up behind me and hit a trash can with a stick and I wasn't expecting it, my tendency is to snatch the inhale, to jerk the air in. So I've got oxygen. I'm not even sure why I need it yet, but I've got it ready just in case I have to run or jump or hit or run away. Okay? So this snatching the breath. Now, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to train yourself to snatch breath into the belly. Very, very difficult. If you get startled, the breath just wants to move up. It doesn't want to move down. Okay? So if you're stuck with that, I'm not saying that you have to be, but it's very difficult to do anything other than that in my personal experience. Okay? So what I've retrained myself, and I'm still working on this, but what I'm retraining myself to do is, if I'm stuck with the upward energy of the startle, okay, why not up and back as opposed to up and forward? So instead of coming up into the chest, I snatch the breath back and up. And the beauty of that is that I still have access to the rest of my lungs. If I startle here, I can't breathe anywhere else, and so I snatch in a small amount of air and I can't do anything, so I have to breathe out again. And I've got to start hyperventilating to get oxygen, okay? And you're well on your way to a panic attack. On the other hand, if I snatch the breath up and back, now I can continue into the mid-back, low back, belly, and I still have the chest if I need it. Okay. So, first, in child's pose, or laying over a bolster or laying over a pillow, slightly rounded back. Practice breathing into the back until you can feel the back expanding as you breathe in. You feel the sensation of breathing into your back. Child's pose is a great place to practice that. Then you can begin working it into your cat-cow. Okay. Let me show you that. So for cat-cow, and working with a back breath, I breathe up the back instead of down. So starting with the pelvis, I tuck the tailbone, round the low back, mid back, upper back, and then tuck the chin. And I reverse the breathing sequence, so I do that on the inhale, because as I expand physically, I breathe into the areas I'm expanding. So I begin rounding the low back, and I breathe into the low back, I breathe into the mid back, I breathe into the upper back, and I broaden through the shoulders as I finish breathing in, and then I come back and exhale. So breathe into the low back, mid back, upper back, and then exhale. So it's reversing the cat-cow breathing that we're familiar with. And there's some schools of yoga who do that almost every time they have the breathing reverse, because it helps us to find the back breath, to exaggerate it, to become more conscious of the back breath. Okay? And then the final variation on cat-cow, using a complete back breath. So here we're going to breathe down the back, or actually we're going to breathe up the back, and then we're going to breathe up the front on one inhale. Whatever area of your body is expanding, that's where the breath is moving. So I'll start with the exhale. I breathe into the low back, mid back, upper back. Then I continue to breathe into the belly, ribs, chest, shoulders. Then I come to neutral and I exhale, letting the spine sink. So I breathe in low back, mid back, upper back, belly, ribs, chest, shoulders. One inhale. Come to neutral and exhale. Try that. From table, we'll go through slowly. Tuck the tailbone, breathe into the low back. As you round the mid and upper back, breathe into the mid and upper back. Pause. Now, as you lift your tailbone, drop the belly and go to the belly, the ribs, the chest, and the shoulders and collarbones. Come back to table, to neutral, and then exhale, just letting your spine sink. 2 more times. Breathe up the back, and then continue breathing up the front. Come to neutral, exhale. 1 more time. Breathe up the back. Continue to inhale up the front. Come back to center and exhale. And then you can begin to play with the back breath and with the back complete breath in different poses. For instance, in downward dog, you can explore breathing into the back of the body, and you can explore a little miniature cat-cow as you're doing that. So I hope you find that useful, and this is the foundation of pranayama. The part 1 and part 2, diaphragmatic breath and complete breath, those are the only 2 breathing patterns you really need to be healthy, but you do need them. Without these 2 patterns, you can't be healthy. Okay? If you have limited time, resources, or interest, put all of your attention on perfecting and getting better and better and better at what we've already covered to this point. Diaphragmatic breathing and complete back breath, or complete breath, either way. Okay. Part 3, 4, 5, as we continue with this series, we'll get into more exotic pranayamas, more exotic breathing patterns that are interesting. But remember, if you have limited time or interest, forget about all the advanced techniques and instead put your time and effort into improving your foundation, the basics. Okay. To this day, one of my favorite breathing exercises is just simply sitting and doing a basic complete back breath, or just a basic back breath into the abdomen, and not even working with controlling the rhythm, just experiencing the breath, and then it becomes meditation. In the next few weeks, we'll start looking at pattern breathing, 4-16-8, for example. What happens when we expand the inhale and shorten the exhale, or expand the exhale and shorten the inhale, and then we'll move into some more advanced theory of pranayama. So I hope you're interested, and I look forward to you joining us again in the future. And in the meantime, practicing this will change your life. The better you get, the more beneficial. Remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Of all the things you have any control over, your breath is by far, unquestionably, the most important habit that you have control over and that you can reprogram. And any energy, any effort, any improvement, no matter how small, in the quality of your breathing will begin to have an immediate, very real, measurable impact on the quality of your life. Okay. Thank you for joining me. Namaste.